Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson on how to read various texts. This is part 1 of 2 video lessons, and I am Miss Jennifer Blank. I will be your guide on this journey. So what we're going to talk about? Well, the types of text that we're going to break down are going to be textbooks, secondary sources, primary sources, maps, charts, and graphs, political cartoons, and art. We're not going to do all of this in one lesson. The first 3 is going to be this one, and the last 3 are going to be part 2. All right, so let's start with textbooks. First of all, do not ever read that textbook word for word. That is a profound waste of your valuable time. All right. What you're going to do when you're going to cut your time down significantly, if you do this, you're going to do these 6 things. All right. First, you're going to read the introduction and the chapter preview word for word. Some textbooks don't have a chapter preview, but if there is one, I want you to read those things word for word. Then you're going to skip all the way to the end and look at the conclusion. You're going to read that word for word as well. All right. This is going to allow you to get an idea of what the big picture is, what the key ideas are, the focal points of the chapter. All right. That's going to help you streamline your reading and also your studying. Then you're going to look at any timelines or chronologies that are listed. You know, they have those little blobs, you know, those little blurbs up to the side and the top of the page or whatever. List of important dates, important people. Those things you're going to want to pay attention to. You don't necessarily have to write all of them down, but you should take some notes on it. Then you're going to read the first paragraph of each section, because the chapter is organized in sections and subsections, sometimes sections. But you're going to read the first paragraph of each section. Then you're going to go to the first and the last paragraph of each subsection. Now, as you're doing this, you're also going to want to pay attention to the boldface words and the sidebar definitions. Those are key topics you're going to want to know about. All right, now I want you to take out something to time yourself with. It could be a cell phone, it could be a stopwatch, but it needs to be something that you can set and that's going to beep or otherwise indicate that your time is up. All right, it's important. These exercises we're going to work on are going to help you read faster, which is an essential skill for the AP exam. If you can't read quickly, you won't be able to get through all the content in time. And even though you know the information, you won't be able to demonstrate that. So this is part of that practice. So just do the best you can, but I want you to take out something to time yourself with. So go ahead and get that now. All right, now you have 1 minute to read this paragraph. Time yourself for 1 minute, pause the video, read this paragraph, and then when the timer goes off, play it again, all right? All right, now I want you to take out a sheet of paper. Now, if you're my guys, you should already have paper out because you should be taking notes, right? Notes that I'm going to check to make sure that you did, right? So in any case, take out a sheet of paper and get ready to make some notes, all right? And have that stopwatch or cell phone handy. You're going to set it for another minute. All right, so go ahead and do that now. Set it for another minute. Now, I want you to write down everything you can remember from the passage on the paper. Don't use complete sentences, just bullet point whatever it is you can remember. If you can't remember anything, that's okay. Don't freak out. This is a skill you're going to learn with time. So time yourself, 1 minute. Pause the video, and then play it again. All right, now you have 30 seconds to answer this question. So again, time yourself and then answer this question. You have 30 seconds. Pause the video. All right, if your answer was C, the 14th century was a time of crisis in European history, you would be correct. Now, if you notice, if you're looking at this question, all of the other answer choices are a specific crises, actually, except for B, which is a response to the crises that were happening. But answer C is the big picture of that paragraph. That passage was telling you about what life was like in the Middle Ages and the massive problems that they encountered. And answer choice C offers a very good summary of what was talked about, a big picture. And this is something you're going to want to train yourself to do. Find the main idea, the big picture information, and then use that to help you fill in the details and help you answer the questions. This is going to be a very important skill for the AP exam. All right, now feel free to pause the video, read the text again. All right, you can only write down one thing, but I want you to read this and think about it and figure out what's the one thing that you think is the most important. All right, so pause the video, take a minute, and figure out what's the most important item, in your opinion. Okay, now, well, actually, before we do this, let's go back here. All right, so when you're looking at this source, right, we could have gone with the multiple choice answer I said previously, which was the 14th century was a time of crisis. That would have been a great important thing to pull. But you also could have pulled down here where it talks about, in spite of the pessimism and crises, important institutions and cultural forms, including representative assemblies, national, yada, yada, yada. So despite the fact that the 14th century was a time of crisis, there was some continuity of political, economic, and social mores. There was some continuity of European society. There were crises, but it wasn't a total decimation of European life. It was just major issues in European life. So despite the fact there were crises, there were things that continued. That could have been a main idea that you could have selected. When you're answering a question like this activity is very organic. I didn't give you a specific focus question per se or a multiple choice question to look for when I asked you to do this task. But let the AP or whatever test you're taking, let the questions be your guide in terms of what you need to pull from whatever it is that you're reading. All right, you're going to need to practice this skill several times to get it down. So if you did well and you nailed it and didn't feel freaked out at all, good for you. You're ahead of the game. You're on point. Awesome. Fully for you. If you didn't and you're like, oh my God, I read the paragraph, I don't remember anything, and that's fine. That's okay. You know, this is the first go around. You're going to need to do this a lot before you get it down. So the important thing is to practice. And then by the time you hit whatever test you're taking, be it the AP exam or something else, you'll be in much better position to get a good grade. All right, now let's talk about secondary sources. I do want to note that I have a separate video lesson that goes into more detail, more depth about secondary sources, but this is going to be a nice little overview, and that you should take a look at later. But for secondary sources, you're looking at something that historians have written, all right? A source is produced by someone not from the time period they discuss. They're looking at primary sources, and they're deriving information from those primary sources. Typically, you're going to see this in the form of monographs, or articles, and there's going to be a thesis, a central idea, an argument that is disputable, as in that there are other viewpoints about this same topic. So you're going to look for that thesis or that argument. Now, if you've been assigned to read the entire article or book, now I'm giving away, you know, tricks of the trade here, so teachers and professors don't kill me, but real talk, I mean, like, these guys have time to read every single word of these ridiculously long books you assign them. I mean, really. You know? Okay, so if you read the entire article or book, you don't read the whole book. You don't got time for that. All right, you're going to read the introduction word for word. You're going to look for the main argument, and you're going to look for the sub-arguments that the author introduces. You're also going to pay particular attention to the structure of the book. This is going to allow you to hone in on the really most important parts. Then you're going to, just like with the textbook, you're going to skip all the way to the conclusion, okay? That's going to give you a restatement of the argument and a summary of the evidence. All right, so it's going to be very useful. Then you're going to pick 2 to 3 chapters to read in depth, all right? Within those chapters, you're going to look for specific evidence that supports the thesis. And then you're going to look at the first and last paragraphs of all the other chapters just so you have a sense of what's going on. All right, now keep the highlighter in hand, unless it's a library book, and then, you know, you just have to take notes on the side. Now, if you're reading excerpts, you read the whole thing. There is no skimming. You read the whole dang thing. All right, you're going to look for the main argument, and you're going to look for the evidence that supports the thesis. That's what you need to do with the secondary source. All right, so I now want you to get yourself ready to time yourself again. You're going to have another minute, so set up that timer in whatever form it is, and get yourself ready. All right, I want you to read this paragraph. You have 1 minute, so pause the video, read this paragraph, 1 minute. All right. I want you to take out that same sheet of paper that we had, right, that you had before, that you were writing the other information on before. And now I want you to tell me the difference between the author's argument and the argument of the other scholar he referenced. Okay, so he talks about there's this one viewpoint, and then he says that he can't see it the same way, right? What is the way that he sees it? And then what is the way that the other scholar saw it? That he's saying he just can't see it that way, right? You have 1 minute, so time yourself, and then pause video, all right? All right, now you should have had your minute to take a look at this source, okay? So what is the major difference between the author's argument and the argument of the other scholar he referenced? Well, the author is much more negative about the Middle Ages. The previous author he talks about, let's actually go back to that passage for a second. So no matter how hard I shake my kaleidoscope, I cannot see what he saw. One reason is that my approach is more Catholic than his. All right, so Catholic actually doesn't necessarily, in this context, it does not mean the Catholic Church. It means universal. If you look up the word Catholic, it actually means universal. So his approach is more universal or broad than his is. So he thinks that, you know, yes, there were some positive things, but if you don't understand the negatives, you're not going to understand the age, right? So that's the difference. The first scholar was much more positive than, or rather, our author was much more negative or less positive than the author he referenced. All right, now let's take a look at some primary sources and how we're going to evaluate those. You want to identify certain things, you want to contextualize the source, explore it, analyze it, and then evaluate it. We're going to go through these point by point. All right, we're also going to get a little bit of practice in a few minutes. All right, so a primary source is not a secondary source. It's first, it is a source produced by someone from the time period they discuss, someone who directly experienced what it is they're talking about. It's sometimes referred to as an eyewitness account. All right, so identify basic questions. The author, what's time period, what's topic or subject of the source, the type of source. Is it pottery? Is it a painting? Is it a sculpture? Is it a letter? Is it a newspaper article? What is it? Then you're going to contextualize and explore. You want to think about, is this reliable? Is this something I can trust? You want to begin to think about what you can infer about the time period from the source. What kind of big ideas can you, about that era, can you pull from this source? Purpose. Why the author created? What was the reason behind the creation of the source? What is left out or not discussed? And then you also need to have an understanding of the historical context surrounding the document. If you don't know the history, you cannot possibly evaluate the source. All right, everything's a product of its environment, and we are no different, and neither are the sources we explore. So if you don't have any knowledge of the history, you're not going to be able to analyze these sources. You can just forget it, like it's not happening. You really need to understand that historical context. You don't need to know every fact, but you need to know enough about the period to make an informed judgment. All right. Now remember, this is a source produced from the time period that that they lived in. All right, that they discussed. They experienced this thing. All right, and you're going to analyze. Right, you got to look at point of view. All right, that's the perspective of the source. You want to look at how the author conveys information. You want to look at the reactions of people who lived at the same time as that author, other people who read it. Look at their contemporaries. How did they react? Did they like it? Did they hate it? Did the guy get burned at the stake? Like, what happened? Credibility versus reliability, these are two different things. And neutrality versus objectivity are also two different things. Now, for information on these guys, I want you to visit this website, all right? This is a university's website, so I want you to go and check that out. You don't have to do it right now. We can finish the video and you can look at it later, but I do want you to look at this because there's some important distinctions there to make. So there's a little research assignment for you. Then you want to think about audience. Who read or did the author intend to read the source? Was it a personal letter meant for one person? Was it a royal proclamation? What was it? All right, then you're going to evaluate. You want to compare it to other sources of the time period. You want to think about what is true versus untrue in the source. You want to also think about what can be inferred about the time period from this source, because now that you've done the other steps, you want to revisit these inferences that you made in the contextualized step. Then you want to look at what information do you need, what information do you need that the source did not provide? All right. Then you're going to look at, was there an advancement of ideology or a certain behavior? What biases are there? You need to revisit point of view at this point. What does this information enable you to discern about the time period, author, event, or subject? All right. So you're going to want to revisit point of view here. All right. Now, again, set your timer for 1 minute. I want you to pause the video and read this. All right. 1 minute, pause video. Take out that same sheet of paper. Write down everything you can remember from the passage. You have 1 minute. All right. I hope you learned what you needed to. I will see you next time. My guys in class will discuss this activity in much more depth, but I will see you in part 2.